At 11 years old, my younger daughter started being afraid to fall asleep alone in her room. She would ask to turn on the nightlight and close the curtains tightly, leaving not a single gap. She would check after me to make sure there was no opening left. "Kara, why are you so bothered by the curtains?" I asked one day. "I'm afraid of the skinless monster," my daughter replied. "Which monster? Skinless?" I sat on the edge of the bed, preparing to listen carefully. "Yes, I call him that because he has no skin, just meat," Kara said, almost in a whisper. "And what does he want with your window?" I asked, looking into her frightened eyes. "I don't know. He hangs and watches. He probably wants to take my skin and wear it." My daughter pulled the blanket up to her chin as if wanting to protect herself. "Let's put your tiger on the windowsill, and he will guard you," I suggested, picking up her favorite soft toy. "Better give it to me here," Kara said. She took the tiger, hugged it, and closed her eyes. I wanted to be the adult who doesn't believe in monsters and attributes everything to an active imagination, but unfortunately, I believed, because I remembered my own terrifying childhood well. Monsters exist. I've always known that. One of them hunted me in my youth. Kara is just a child. She could have had a bad dream or heard a scary story at school. How can I tell if her words are fantasy or reality? The skinless monster. There was something familiar about it. A similar story was told in my childhood. The kids talked about a monster that would peel people's skin off and wear it like a costume. In the 90s, our city was full of such rumors. "Dad!" My little girl screamed from her room. I rushed to her in fear. Kara was sitting on the bed and pointing at the window. "He's out there now. I hear him," she screamed. The curtains were still tightly closed. There were no gaps between them. The room was lit by the soft light of the nightlight. Kara kept her eyes fixed on my face. I didn't want to show that I was scared too. Suppressing my fear, I took 2 steps forward, grabbed the curtains, and pulled them open. "Oh, no one here, Kara. There's no monster. Look for yourself," I said. "He was just there. He was breathing on the wall and then he, like this." Kara stuck out her tongue, imitating wild, ragged breathing. I pulled the tool back and looked closely at the glass. On the other side, a cloudy trace of breath was fading. Kara wasn't lying. Someone had been outside the window just a few seconds ago. Someone had been breathing on the glass. There were long, distinct marks on the dusty windowsill, like fingerprints. There were many of them. It wasn't the first time someone had held onto the metal sheet and scratched the paint. But who could climb the wall to the 7th floor? "Don't be afraid, Kara. Daddy will protect you from any monster," I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it myself. Every parent thinks they can protect their child, but is that really true? Not everyone can even imagine the dangers that threaten children. I didn't sleep almost the whole night, constantly keeping an eye on my daughter. She was peacefully sleeping, curled up under the blanket, hugging her plush tiger. Since then, the illusory calmness collapsed like a theatrical backdrop, and the terrifying world opened up again. I had long ago stopped reading troubling news on principle, but when necessary, it reaches our ears on its own. In another part of the city, near the train station, human bones, gnawed to the marrow, were found, and not just anywhere, but in a trash can. For me, this was a sign that the nightmare had returned. Baby Eater, that was the name of the creature that hunted me when I was a teenager. A tall, terrifying woman. I remembered her as if I had seen her yesterday. Her black hair, eyes bulging from their sockets, and hoarse laugh. She nearly pulled me into her mouth, but I yanked my hand away and smashed her skull with my cassette player. It happened on Snezhnaya Street. In the 90s, there were so many rumors about this mysterious place. Some said that the street didn't exist, that it wasn't real. Others insisted it was real, but then it disappeared. But all these stories ended as suddenly as they began. We grew up, and our nightmares seemed to vanish into thin air. They remained as strange memories of the distant past, without consequences for the present. Why? Why did it end then? And why has it returned now? We survived the trials, and now it's time for our children. Kara is so fragile and small, not even looking like a 5th grader, just a child. I had to protect her. As it happened, I received a message from someone I hadn't spoken to since school. "Hi, Alex. Do you remember me? I'm Rudolph. We talked when we were in school. They used to call me Rud. In the photos, he was a slim man with a sad face and gray in his hair. I wouldn't have recognized him if he hadn't introduced himself. Rudd, the boy who loved to play video games. I had visited him a few times. We discussed our problems. I was almost eaten by the baby eater, and he was almost strangled by someone called Uncle Smile. Then all of this was forgotten, and our communication gradually faded. And a whole lifetime passed since then. Hello, Rudolph. Of course, I remember you. I replied and stared at the screen, waiting for the next message. He couldn't just write for no reason. Finally, Rudolph finished typing. I have an important matter for you. It concerns our past. I and a few other guys are planning to meet. Can you come? I was deeply worried, but I knew I couldn't refuse. This concerned me and others. We hadn't finished something. We had only postponed it. Where and when? I replied without thinking. This didn't sound like a reunion or an old friends party. I wasn't invited to a cafe, but asked to meet at a stadium. A place overgrown with grass, hidden in the shadow of a long-closed factory. Honestly, I thought it had been demolished a long time ago, but it still stood and hadn't changed much in a couple of decades. The only difference was that the seats and the stands were replaced, and the railings were repainted. The rain drizzled, and the sky was swirling with clouds. I entered the area and saw a crowd of familiar and unfamiliar faces. A bald man with a round face and a noticeable belly introduced himself as Ban. He looked tired and worn out by life. A man with a scar on his cheek introduced himself as Harry. And then I remembered him. Once, we lived in the same house and even talked a little. I remembered he had a twin brother named John. One time, Harry got those deep scars on his face. After that, he became quiet and never told anyone how he got injured. There was also a woman in the group, beautiful, elegant, dressed in an expensive coat. Her name was Alice. Rodolph couldn't take his eyes off her and stayed close by, clearly taken with her. The leader of the group was someone special, a man with an unkempt long beard, wearing a worn-out jacket, but with piercing eyes. My name is Gamry, he told me in a raspy voice. Then he looked at the others and added, thanks for not being afraid to come. Not everyone responded to this call. We intended to sit on the bleachers, but the plastic seats were wet with rain and covered in soggy leaves. So, we formed a circle near the rusty soccer goal. I thought how strange our group must have looked, people in their 40s, gathered at a stadium, discussing something in hushed tones. It might seem like we were planning to relive our youth by kicking a ball around in the drizzle. I've explained everything to them, Gamry said, turning to me, but not to you. His intense gaze held mine. We're all connected by the past, and we can't escape it until we do what needs to be done. I wouldn't have asked for your help if I could manage alone, but I can't. Can you be more specific? I asked. In childhood, each of you faced your own nightmare, Gamry explained, and you're here because you overcame it. I also had my enemy. I called him Reverse, my reflection from beyond the mirror. He brought monsters with him. Uncle Mask, Grinny, Frostbite, Baby Eater. Who else? They were all his accomplices, and all of them crossed into our world because of him. He's their anchor. Harry touched the old scars on his face, as if they still hurt. We spent our lives haunted by them, he said, but just the other day, I saw blue sticky footprints on the road, and then you contacted me. Why is it starting again? Gamry's expression darkened. Apparently, all these years, he was hiding some secret. As a kid, he didn't talk about the footprints, though he asked about my story more than once. Now, it's clear he feared us. Reverse saw us conquer those monsters. Even individually, the thought of us uniting scared him, so he went into hiding, waiting for us to forget. But now, he's bold again, planning revenge for his humiliation. I lost my family to him. I lost my home. He claimed an entire district, turning it into a blurred border between reality and nightmare. I've wandered my whole life, afraid of his threats, but I'm not scared anymore. I hope you aren't either. We must face him on Snezhnaya Street. If we succeed, the nightmares will vanish. I thought about Kara. Could I risk my life and leave her without a parent? We're not young anymore, Dan joked with a smirk. Gray hairs, bald spots, bad backs, a bit late to become heroes. We have children, Alice added, her fear more evident than anyone else's. Gamry surveyed us with sharp eyes. No one else can do this. Time stands still on Snezhnaya Street. It's stuck in our childhood. Only those who lived in the 90s can enter. For everyone else, the way is barred. I was torn. Leaving my family felt impossible. They wouldn't even know where I'd gone, but letting nightmares reclaim our lives wasn't an option either. Now that I was here, there was no turning back. I looked at the others. None seemed ready to leave, though Rodolphe hesitated, glancing nervously at Alice. "What if we fail?" he asked. "I've heard that street is crawling with things. Are we just going to wander around looking for your double? What if we die?" "Snezhnaya Street is special," Giamri replied. "It's both nightmare and reality. Have you ever realized you were dreaming? In those moments, you can control events. Imagine this journey as a game. We're the heroes, and the monsters are enemies. Think of their weaknesses, picture defeating them, and when you can back out. Even if I have to go alone, I'll go, but those who join me will be heroes." "We're going now?" I asked, as if my decision had already been made. "Yes, it's not far," Giamri said, glancing at the stadium exit. No one backed out. Giamri, Rodolphe, Alice, Dan, and I followed him down at Autumn Street. The man knew the way well. His home had been there once. Our mismatched group moved through garages, shrubs, courtyards, and alleys. I couldn't believe I agreed to this, heading off with near strangers, oblivious to the dangers ahead. My adult skepticism made it hard to take seriously. It felt like a game, something pretend. Surely, we'd wander through old neighborhoods, find nothing, and go our separate ways. But suddenly, we found ourselves in a strange place, a narrow alley, with gray walls and ancient garbage bins no longer seen today. I'd been here before. The alley looked drained of color. Everything was pale. Then I saw something familiar on the asphalt, a cassette player. My cassette player. It had a black and gray body labeled stereo, with a sticker of a grinning orange skull and crossbones. A crack marred the corner, smeared with old blood. I couldn't believe it. It was still here. My voice came out high and childish. Reaching for the player, I was startled by how thin my fingers looked. It was the hand of a teenager. Breath caught in my chest as I turned to the others. They weren't the 40-somethings I come with. They were kids again, 13, 14 years old. Rodolphe had turned back into the blonde boy I remembered. Alice was a pretty freckled girl. Harry was once again a small, round-faced kid with messy hair. Even Giamri was now a boy with a long fringe, though his piercing eyes remained unchanged. Dan, once bald and pudgy, was a skinny, curly-haired teen. All of them wore the clothes of our youth, baggy jeans, sneakers, track jackets. Looking down, I saw my old 90s jacket. The others stared at themselves and each other in amazement. "Are we kids again?" Ben cried, his voice brimming with excitement, not fear. Alice twirled in place, marveling at her small, delicate body. Am I really this thin? Rod, was I really like this? Rediscovering our teenage selves was nothing short of miraculous. The burden of years slipped away like an old, heavy coat. I felt like it was the eve of my birthday, excited, adventurous, filled with hope. "Quiet down," Giamri called in a boyish voice, though his tone was still commanding. "We need to focus. Split up. Search for him. Don't be afraid. Pretend you're in a game. You'll find the tools or weapons you need along the way. And if you see someone like me, shout for the others." We left the alley, stepping onto a broad, foggy street frozen in time. Old concrete buildings, outdated cars, empty yards, a shattered newsstand. "Spread out," Giamri ordered. "I'm not leaving Alice alone," Rod protested, clutching her hand protectively. "All right, the key is not to waste time. Let's find him." Each of us headed in a different direction. I wandered aimlessly down the sidewalk, letting my feet guide me. My heart was torn by conflicting emotions. Fear loomed over me, but I couldn't let it take control. I fought the urge to plug in my headphones and blast music from my old player. The teenage spirit within me awoke. I thought I was ready to take risks and fight. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a small cardboard box resting on the sidewalk. It seemed to beckon to me, silently urging, "Open me." Curious, I approached and nudged the lid open with my foot. Inside was a single glass pepper shaker, its silvery lid gleaming. Black ground pepper filled it. "Seriously?" I laughed, lifting the shaker from the box. "Essential tools or weapons will find their way to you," Giamri had once said. This place must truly respond to thoughts, I realized. As if on cue, an eerie, familiar sound reached me, a wild, guttural breathing. Footsteps clicked against the asphalt, growing louder. Through the thickening mist, a tall shadow emerged, and then she came into view, Baby Eater. The monstrous woman charged down the sidewalk, her enormous mouth wide open, her bulging eyes fixed on me. I didn't hesitate. I hurled the pepper shaker straight at her gaping maw. My aim was perfect. It lodged directly in her throat. The towering figure stumbled, clawing at her neck. She collapsed, coughing violently. Baby Eater was choking, writhing on the ground before me. And then, as if expelling her very essence, she vomited a torrent of blood-streaked bones, her own skeleton. Her skull rolled away, ribs and vertebrae piled high, and her deflated skin crumpled like an empty leather bag. She lay still, her lifeless eyes staring into nothingness. Only then did it hit me. I'd done the right thing. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I'd imagined Baby Eater having a deadly allergy to pepper. It was a fleeting thought after Gamry had urged us to think up our monster's weaknesses. He'd been right. This street of nightmares was one we could control, if only we believed it. Distant explosions echoed, and gelatinous blue globs began to rain from the sky. Someone else had defeated their monster. Alice screamed behind me. "He's here. Dies. Get him," Rude yelled. I ran toward the foggy chaos where the battle was raging. When I arrived, I saw Rude, Alice, and Ban pelting stones at someone, a boy who looked like Gamry, but wasn't quite him. His face was twisted in anger. His eyes glowed a chilling blue, and his sharp fingers glinted like shards of broken glass. "Stop, please," the boy cried, shielding himself with his hands, but the others were relentless. A stone struck his face, and it shattered like glass, a crack splitting from forehead to chin. Gamry stepped forward. "Stop, everyone, he's mine." The group froze and stepped aside. Gamry faced his doppelganger, standing tall. "You're my reflection. You obey me, mimic my movements." The shattered reflection stiffened, mirroring Gamry's stance. It silently moved its lips to mimic his words. Gamry had turned it into his puppet. "And now," Gamry commanded, "go back to where you came from." A large chunk of the reflection's face fell off, shattering into countless fragments on the ground. Inside, it was hollow, like a delicate glass ornament. Obeying, it turned and walked into the fog, gradually fading away. Gamry turned to us with a sad smile. "Thank you, everyone. You can go home now. I'll see to it that he never returns." "We'll wait for you," I offered. Gamry shook his head. "No, this place will always be the border between two worlds. Someone has to guard it. I'll stay, so the reverse can't come back." "Forever?" Alice asked softly. Gamry smiled faintly. "I'll be a little lonely, but I'm used to it. On the bright side, I'll never grow old. You'll all age and wrinkle, but not me. And when you're gray and almost at the end of your road, come visit. Keep me company." "Deal," Ban said with a grin. Gamry laughed, then turned and followed the fading figure of his double into the mist. We watched until he disappeared. Our group began the journey back. As we crossed out of the nightmare street, I felt the weight of my adult body return. My back ached, and I noticed Ban's once youthful face now thick with lines. Harry stood tall, his scars etched deep, and Alice had become a stunning woman. Rude's white hair glistened as he looked at her with the same adoration as before. Gamry was gone, left to guard the border of two worlds. In my hand, I found my old cassette player, a long-lost treasure. Curious, I popped on the headphones and pressed play. The song I hadn't finished so many years ago filled my ears, taking me back to a fleeting moment of childhood wonder.